And gentlemen, we are starting our session 3 on global water challenges, disputes, and shortages. The chair of the session is Ambassador Shafkat Kakakhel, Chairperson, Sustainable Development Policy Institute, Islamabad. The first participant of this session is Ms. Aisha Khan, Chief Executive Officer, Mountain and Glacier Protection Organization, Islamabad. She is going to speak on climate and Cryosphere, two pillars of planetary balance and stability. Ms. Simi Kamal, founder and chairperson of Hisar Foundation, Karachi. She is going to speak on transboundary water disputes, changing the narrative. Our third speaker, he is also the chair of the session, Ambassador Shafkat Kakakhel. He is going to speak on future of the Indus Water Treaty. Over to you.
Dear friends, as was mentioned a little while ago, this session of this conference is going to focus on global water challenges, which is an extremely important subject globally, regionally, and nationally, posed by the phenomenon of climate change. Now, all the impacts of climate change, whether it's the rapid melting of glaciers or whether it's the uptick in extreme events, whether it's the higher temperature both on land and in the seas, inevitably impact the quality and quantity of water resources. So I think it is absolutely proper that a conference that is being held on the theme of 70 years after Bandung should focus on that. Of course, today, those who attended Bandung have multiplied. So we have more than 135 countries of the world, and somehow most of them face the challenges both of the dwindling quantity of water and the deteriorating quality of water. So I don't want to deny you the benefit of the wisdom of my distinguished panelists, and we'll start with the climate and Cryosphere, the two pillars of planetary balance and stability. As we all know, the Indus Basin depends heavily, more than any other basin, on the timely melting of the snows stored by the glaciers, high mountain glaciers. And one of the most profound impacts of climate change is the more than usual rapid melting of the glaciers. So Aisha Khan, who has been working on this subject for a long time, she has been writing in daily newspapers. She's been engaged in project on dealing with the adaptation of the impacts of climate change in our mountain communities. She will enlighten us on this extremely important subject. Aisha, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Masuma Hasan, and to the Pakistan Institute of International Affairs for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to interact and learn from such brilliant minds. I've been listening to all the panels since yesterday, and there has been a lot of learning in that. And I'm particularly honored to be on a panel today with distinguished people like Ambassador Shafkat Kakakhel and Dr. Simi Kamal. Both of them are respected professionals, and I have learned a lot from them in the years that I've been working in this field myself. We have convened here to commemorate Bandung, and every speaker before me and yesterday has linked their topic to Bandung. So I too am going to follow suit, and I'm going to look at the climate climate and cryosphere through the lens of Bandung and try to see how we can make that connection which can reignite our imagination and make us understand why Bandung, despite so many things having changed in the world, is still relevant today. I'm going to talk about the cryosphere, and I know that when I mention that word, a lot of people give me a very quizzical look because they don't know that term. It's a very technical term. It means water in its frozen state. It is made up of ice, it's made up of snow, it's made up of glaciers, it's made up of permafrost. These are things people don't see in their daily lives, and therefore it is not important to them. But we need to remember we all rely on water. We often talk about the importance of water, and we see it through the lens of transboundary implication in flows, about which we're going to talk later. We also talk about the management of water and about the efficiency of its use, but we rarely go back and think, where does this water come from? And what is happening to this state of water, the frozen state of water? Because if there is a hydrological imbalance and there is too much melting, we will have floods. If these glaciers shrink, then we will eventually have drought and desertification. So why we need the balance is because we need as much snow to replace the snow that melts. That is what maintains the balance. We know that climate change is affecting every sector. It's affecting every sector in life and all the functions that are related to the ecology and the ecosystem which make life functions possible. We also know that snow cover persistence has been changing, and in this year and last year it has been the lowest in 23 years. That shows a pattern that the ice is melting more rapidly and it is not being replaced by adequate snow or ice, and the glaciers are shrinking, the ice sheets are falling, the permafrost is melting. What that means is emission of more methane, accelerated impact on global greenhouse emissions, and further acceleration. So what we need to understand is that if we have a disruption in the cryosphere, there will be no life. Put it simply, when there is disruption in the water cycle, there is chaos in the world, and eventually it's going to affect all life. That's why it's very, very important that we kind of understand this word cryosphere, or come up with an equivalent terminology to describe water in its frozen state. Now, there are three main centers that we have, cryospheric centers. They're different, but they have some things in common. The common thing is that all of them are covered by ice and snow. The uncommon things are the population centers, their sizes, and the economies of scale that are dependent on them. Now, the Arctic or the North Pole is governed by the Arctic Council. So it has a formal system or structure of governance. It has 8 countries that have areas which are part of the North Pole. And it supports the economies and ecosystems of those people, but their incomes are higher, so their coping capacities are better. The Antarctic or the South Pole is an uninhabited area, so it doesn't matter. It's a preserve for scientists and researchers to go and collect data, knowledge, information. The Tibetan Plateau, or what is known as the Third Pole, is what matters to us, because we have also 8 countries that are impacted by the Third Pole, or the Himalaya Karakoram Hindu Kush mountain system as it is known. It supports 2 billion people, and here we have no regional framework of governance. So what happens in the cryosphere is really no one's responsibility, but it's going to affect 2 billion people. So we need to be mindful of this fact as we move forward to decide how we want to manage our cryosphere. What is it that we need to do to save our snow? Now, there is a crisis in the cryosphere going on right now in the HKH mountain system. It supports 10 major river systems, and it has 4 biological hotspots. So the direct beneficiaries are 240 million people, but the indirect beneficiaries are about 1.8 billion people. When you look at the 3 major river systems that we are concerned with, Indus is the most important to us. It serves as a lifeline for us. We are a lower riparian, single river, single basin country. That is something that we have to understand is a vulnerability factor. Whether we like that or not, we have to build our strategies to protect ourselves. The Ganges river system supports about 600 million people, whereas the Indus supports about 270 million people, and the Brahmaputra supports 114 million people. When there is disruption in the cryosphere, all these river systems and all the people and ecosystems and ecologies that depend on them will get displaced. And Eric talked about displacement before and climate and conflict and how the cryospheric changes are going to be affected by that and trigger that movement of people. According to a World Bank report, I think there's a projection of about 800 million people who will be displaced by 2050. So we have to factor the cryosphere in everything that we do. Now, the third pole has the largest and the densest collection of glaciers outside the North and South Pole, and in many ways it acts as the balancing pole between the 2 poles. When we look at the cryosphere and we think of mountains and snow, we also need to remember that what happens in the cryosphere doesn't stay in the mountains, that it ends up in the oceans, that if the cryosphere melts and if there is an increase or sudden rise in the sea level, coastal cities are also going to get affected. Talking about the arc of vulnerability and South Asia and Pakistan, we have to understand that we have a geography both in South Asia and within Pakistan that starts from the cryosphere and ends at the coast. We have 5 countries in South Asia that have mountains, and we have 3 that have large coastal areas. Within Pakistan, we start from our mountains and we end in the coast. So whatever happens upstream affects downstream communities. But I think people don't make this connection. People who are living in Karachi or Balochistan rarely think about what's happening in the mountains of Gilgit-Baltistan or how actions over there are going to affect them. So we have to also start linking people and communities to make them understand this interdependency and why we need to work together and collectively. And that is one of the messages of Bandung that we have. The cryospheric lifeline is very important for us because we rely on the flows of the Indus, and about 50 or over 50% of those flows come from snow and glacial melt. Now, that is not true for the Ganges or for the Brahmaputra. So their vulnerability is not the same as ours. India has over 20 river basins. Bangladesh also has multiple river basins. Even Afghanistan has 5 river basins. We are the only country in the region that has a single basin. So we need to account for that and understand why it's more important for us to promote the narrative of hydrosolidarity, because our survival depends on that. Now, how do we use the water of the Indus? I think Dr. Simi is going to talk and elaborate more on that. All I will say is that 91% of that water goes towards irrigation and agriculture. So every year when we have changes in that flow, and that change can be the variability. If there is too much coming at the wrong time, it's of no use to us. If it's too little coming to us later at a time when we don't need it, it is again of no use to us. So we need a system where the cryospheric balance is maintained and water melts at the right time and water flows in the rivers in the right volume and the right quality at the right time. Otherwise, I, who work with mountain communities, have been witnessing now for 20 years how the hydrological imbalance is affecting mountain communities. They don't have water when they need it for planting. And when the season passes, because it's high mountain area, you're cultivating at 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 feet, there is a single cropping season. You've lost the time frame for planting and for agriculture. So we have an issue of food security. The first thing that's related with irregularity in timing of the water is agriculture, because we are an agrarian economy and we rely heavily on agriculture. We already have about 3 million people who are facing food insecurity. Now, out of the total area of cultivable area in Pakistan, which is 30.5 million hectares, 18 million hectares depends on irrigated agriculture. So just imagine for a moment if the flows of the Indus shrink for whatever reason. Let's say, according to science, if the current pattern of warming continues, we will have a 30% reduction. If it goes up to 2.6 or 3%, which is projected, there'll be a 70% reduction. If there is a 70% reduction in flows, meanwhile, our population has grown from 240 to 500 million, how are we going to feed our people? So this is very, very important. And already we see we have nutritional deficiencies. 40% of our population is stunted. And if this ratio increases, that means we will have more than half the population of this country who are cognitively impaired, which is a very dangerous thing. We depend on hydropower right now. It has a high mix in our energy mix. Fossil fuel, of course, is the dominant mix, but in the renewables, we have the hydropower. So we have a lot of potential for hydropower. But how are we going to develop? We already are facing shortages in our dams. If there is further regression of glaciers and changes in patterns of melting, what will we do with the big dams that we are building? There will be no water for us to store. So it's very important that we protect the cryosphere, we save our snow so that water keeps flowing so that we can transition from fossil fuel to renewable energy. Our present storage capacity is only 30 days, which is very little. If anything happens, we are going to be in big trouble. I've just got my slip of paper, so I will hurry up with my next slides. Most of the cryospheric disasters are hydrometeorological disasters. Most of the disasters Pakistan has faced has been floods and flash floods. So if we look at the economic losses, they are on the very high side. And if we don't protect our cryosphere, we are not going to have the capacity to be able to cope. And the floods of 2022 are a very good example of that. Now, quickly coming to South Asia. South Asia is already in a flux. There is movement of people, there is deprivation, there is overpopulation, there is scarcity of resources, there is tension, political tension among countries. So this is going to create a lot of trouble. When you have lesser resources, it is human nature to be less generous also. In the earlier sessions, we've talked about genocide, we've talked about displacement, and I think all this will come together because when push comes to shove and your own survival and preservation are in question, then you become inward looking, you become selfish, you want to preserve yourself, you don't really care about the other person. And as we move forward in time, I think we are going to see more and more of that. Now, the question that we have to answer is, do we do this alone or do we do this together? Do we think of ourselves, despite all our political differences and problems and tensions that we have, as one South Asia? And I think that because we share an ecology, we share land, we share air, we share water, we cannot escape from our geography. We have no other option but to think of resolving this problem as one South Asia. Now, there are a few things that we need to talk about, and I will just quickly jump to climate diplomacy. We have a lot of diplomats in this room, and anyone who has engaged in negotiations will understand the difference between distributive and integrative negotiations. In distributive, there is one winner and the others are losers, and the winner doesn't really care because he or she thinks they've got a good deal for themselves. If they can grab the largest share of the pie, they have succeeded. But that is short-term gain because it's inherently unfair. Integrative means where there are no losers and everyone is a winner because you've taken care to be equitable and just. What we have done in our diplomacy, each country in South Asia, is to be distributive. Everybody wants things for themselves, and they do not think of how it's going to impact other countries in the region and why it's important to think of ourselves as one region, one integrated region. And if nothing else, climate change is giving us now that rationale for shifting the narrative and thinking of ourselves as one region. Now, coming to Bandung and linking that with climate, with the Paris Agreement, I think what was true today is true then is true today also. In Bandung, the people convened together, countries convened together because they wanted to have a new vision for a future which was more equal, which was more equitable, which talked about the promise of a better tomorrow for everyone and not just a few people. When we talk about the Paris Agreement, I think it was also built on a moral mandate, essentially, to say it's one humanity and shared responsibility. So the two can come together, and if we look at it through the lens of Bandung, there are possibilities for us to revive that spirit. We can think of peace and diplomacy and solidarity and development, and we can share things in the region through research, through experience sharing, and trying to think of us as a region where every country is an upper or lower riparian state. So it doesn't exclude anyone. At some point in time, everyone is going to have to do more with less water. So if we want to avoid conflict, if we want to avoid chaos, then we have no other option but to work together. We have always a choice that we can make about our future. We can look at the doom and gloom scenario, we can look at peace, prosperity, and stability, but whichever one we choose, we have to then follow that up with actions. I think Bandung was ideas. It was talking about a set of ideas, a set of values. And the countries that understood what was the ethos of Bandung profited from it. In Pakistan, we always like to quote China as a success story. But I think what we fail to understand is that China perhaps understood the ethos of Bandung. It built on the values and teachings of Confucius. It followed the teachings of Tao, and it realized that you don't only need hard work and discipline, you need patience and wisdom as well to move forward in time. So I would say that if we want to talk about the moral dimensions of Bandung, we have to understand that it is not just a set of words that we used. Alone, they become meaningless. They have to be matched by the follow-up actions which need to be demonstrated by the countries. And if we develop that understanding that we will follow a path that does no harm to people or to nature, we will have the ability to reform. And I think that is very, very important right now to build moral leadership from the margins, because we have to revive that hope. We know that we live in a changing geopolitical space where the law of the jungle now seems to be the dominant way of providing governance to people. But ideals are important. I think striving for a better future for everyone is something that every individual should think about as his or her personal responsibility. We should not rely entirely on the state to guide us. We are there as citizens to guide the state. So I think that if we don't have a concept of humanity, which divides, and a concept of humanity which is divided by race or by ethnicity or by country, we are never going to flourish and become one humanity. So I think we first need to build that narrative within our country to provide a model of governance that replicates the ethos of Bandung. Once we've done that, we will have a very good moral standing to say, okay, so I close just by saying that, we need to live with hope, and therefore it is very, very important for us. And thank you, Dr. Masuma, for bringing back Bandung to our minds and refreshing our memory that humanity is very important and ideals are very important, and a life without hope diminishes the human spirit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aisha Khan, for your excellent presentation and the sermon which concluded your presentation. And now we have our second panelist, the distinguished expert that I have known for decades as a dedicated soldier in the battle for sustainable development and environmental protection, Simi Kamal, the founder of Hisar Foundation. She's going to speak on transboundary water disputes, the need for changing the narrative. And I suggest I should not impose my own 2 cents on you and leave it to Simi Kamal to introduce her topic and to deal with the topic with the competence that I know she's capable of. Simi.
Thank you very much, Shafkat Saab. Dr. Masuma, thank you very much for inviting me, and always nice to meet with you, Aisha Saiba. And for many friends who are in this room, Adab Arz hai. I'm really happy to be engaging with people who have worked at the global level and who understand the very disrupted diplomatic relations that exist in the world today and have direct impact on us. So if we look around us, we can see, so Ali, can you help change these? Or can I do it myself? Can I have this clicker? Thank you so much. Okay. So if we look around the world today, here are all the terms you just heard Aisha Saiba say. Now, building on that, the kinds of reality that we're experiencing, I would like to bring to your attention. So the unexpected and intense changes in water regimes and water cycles, the shifting of seasons, not just bits of climate change, the distortion of natural regions, the geographical regions, the loss of ecosystems, and major threats to river systems as well as aquifers and others. So while we are experiencing all of that, a clear clarion call has gone out globally, led by younger people, youngsters of this world. They want to return to nature and to nature-based solutions because they want to have a world in which they can live. Otherwise, they won't have a world to live in. Free-flowing rivers, breaking the status quo of the dominant capitalist systems. Yes, this is now being asked. It is being questioned like never before. And it is now acknowledged as the principal cause of climate change in this, what we call the Anthropocene age. Transboundary conflicts, on the other hand, have been about using rivers and their waters for mainly economic reasons. Irrigation, agriculture, industry, cargo, transport, control of shipping, and maybe tourism. But the perceptions around rivers are now going back to what they used to be. So the river Indus influences the thinking of people in Pakistan to mythic proportions. Here in Sindh, we say, Sindhu Darya Hamari Mata hai, or hai, okay? So they have been invested with personality. If you recall the Narbada movement that took place, and in which Arundhati Roy was part of that, already at that time we were talking about the importance of rivers and giving them personality. So just like companies, they would have legal personality. The prehistory myths and oral traditions have become really important, and we have come really full circle in terms of conservation of rivers. So, rivers that are shared by more than one country, where the term transboundary comes from, it's been impacted by the power of the country sharing the river in relation to each other, very much against the spirit of Bandung. The agreements that bind them, the original underlying factors which have all changed, and how these outdated and less relevant realities of yesterday now need to be looked at of the realities of today. All of these need looking, including the Indus Waters Treaty. So I want to draw your attention to two recent global reports that came out last year. The first one has to do on progress on transboundary water cooperation in relation to SDG X 6.5.2. And the other one, it's a very interesting report that I would like all of you to look at. It is a report brought out by a UN-appointed rapporteur on water, which set up a temporary commission to look at the economics of water. And the language that you see there, you'll be surprised. So, transboundary waters today, they include aquifers and lakes, not just river basins. Usually, transboundary water accounts for 60% of the world's freshwater flows. That means we have agreements around those. And actions in one country have consequences in another. And often, coastal resources are jeopardized by upstream activities. So, जैसे मैं हमेशा कहती हूँ, हर एरिया पे एक पंजाब है और एक सिंध है. It's not unique. And they've all sorted out their problems or are attempting to do so. So, what is this indicator 6.5.2? It looks at the proportion of transboundary basin areas with an operational arrangement for water cooperation. And it looks at existence of any joint bodies, regular formal communication between riparian countries, joint or coordinated management plans, and regular exchange of data and information. As we can see, a large part of this at least was being done under IWT. So if you look at some of the transboundary data that is available, only 43 out of 153 countries that share transboundary waters have operational arrangements that cover a large proportion of their water. I found out about, 15 years ago, and it really shocked me, that Canada and US don't have one large agreement on their border. They have 300 different agreements at different levels. I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying it really surprised me. Because, in our imagination, if there were countries cooperating, there would be one big agreement to take care of it. So transboundary waters account for 60% of the world's freshwater flow, and 153 countries have territory within at least one of the 286 transboundary river and lake basins, and 592 transboundary aquifer systems. These figures are quite staggering, and I think they point towards the reality that we are dealing with. So at least 20 countries lack any arrangements for sharing transboundary waters, and only 8 countries have improved their cooperation with neighborhood countries in between 2020 and 2023. So there was a lot more cooperation in the past. So for an arrangement for water cooperation to be operational, so these are these 4 conditions that I shared with you earlier. Maybe later we can see how we stand, how IWT stands for this. Take a look at this map. So you can see both the transboundary river and lake basins and the transboundary aquifers. We often don't consider aquifers, but aquifers hold huge amounts of water. Even in Pakistan, some say that it is over 60 or 70 million acre feet is already available in our aquifers. And we don't have any transboundary agreements on aquifers as yet. And here you can see those 43 countries that having 90% or more of their transboundary rivers, lakes, and aquifer basin areas covered by some kind of agreement. So these agreements are all really interesting if we take a look at the SDGs. So when we look at poverty alleviation, here is an example where El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, through a tri-national commission, they have been able to do development programs and actions to fight poverty and improve living conditions of local communities. I'm very interested in this. Then you will see one on food security between Portugal and Spain, and they have their own framework which they are operationalizing through transboundary arrangements. And then there are so many others. I'm not going to read them out, but you can have a copy. So on health and well-being, on gender equality, on clean energy, on climate change, and on ecosystems protection, peace and security, and also building partnerships. So you can see that these are all different objectives of transboundary cooperation. It's not just about distributing water, as Aisha was saying, just dividing up the waters. There are many other more holistic objectives. Now, most importantly, the whole language on water is changing. From water pricing to water value, from disputes to cooperation and coordination, from community to global common good. Sorry, from commodity, this is a mistake here, from commodity to global common good, from competition to justice and equity, and from transboundary to hydrological cycle. So in some ways, the whole idea of transboundary cooperation may already be passé, because the kinds of changes that we are seeing in the hydrological cycle, and Cryosphere was mentioned a little while ago, there may be other ways that we may handle this. So, governing the hydrological cycle as a global common good is a new idea which has come up in discussions on economics and the economic interdependence of the world. And this is through both blue and green water flows. So blue water is what is very visible, which is rivers, lakes, others, sea, and green water is what is in vegetation and plants in the atmosphere. So the deepening interconnections between the water crisis, the climate change, and the loss of the planet's natural capital has really forced people to think differently. And how water flows through all 17 Sustainable Development Goals, well, 16 of them have water as a very major part of their achievement. So minimal water requirements of water for a dignified life, this is a new concept. Before we only talked about consumption, we talked about domestic water. Okay, so this is a new figure which has come up through these studies, and recognizing our interdependence, deepening looking at new water provisions first for those left behind. Okay, and this has been a major part of the sixth canal issue that people are talking about, and redirecting today's massive subsidies that contribute to water's overuse in many sectors and also contributes to environmental degradation, to water saving solutions and to protecting and restoring freshwater ecosystems. I wonder how many of you know about what happened to Lake Biwa in Japan. So about 30 years ago, maybe 35 years ago, the whole of Lake Biwa turned red because there was so much pollution that the lake atrophied, and it gave rise to certain pathogens that made the river red. And all the babies that were using water from that river source started getting nappy rash and started getting sick. And so the mothers went on a battle and protest. It took them 10 years until they got to the Supreme Court of Japan. And it was a battle in the court, and the Supreme Court of Japan then said that the polluters had to clean up that lake. And they had to clean it up. And in 2003, I went to see it, and it was a beautiful blue lake again. Okay, and the whole idea of stewardship, which of course the corporate sector has now adopted as a fashion, but you know, it came from Japan, and it came from what happened with that lake. So we have to be very cognizant of the fact that citizens' movements do bring change. Sometimes it takes a very long time, and the history of the women's suffrage movement is known to all. How long it took and what kinds of tactics they had to use including whipping Winston Churchill on the street. And of course, they had to get things bit by bit, because at first they only agreed to women in parliament, only those women that owned land. And then slowly, slowly it changed. So I think this is what we need to really understand, that it's going to take time. We need to move towards mission-oriented innovations in thinking, in engineering, in other ways, and move to capacity building and investment across the entire water cycle. In some of my work over the last 10, 15 years, I've talked about and tried to convince everyone that Pakistan's economy is a water economy, and that this is how it needs to be seen, and that the entire water value chain has to be understood and strengthened. So, building partnership for stakeholders needs the launch of a new revolution of food systems to improve water productivity in agriculture while moving to nutritional needs. And Aisha spoke about stunting, and we know how terrible it is here in Pakistan. We need to restore natural habitats that are critical to protecting green water, and we have to establish circular water economy, including changes in industrial processes, especially in cities. So, enabling a clean energy era with much lower water intensity use, ensuring that no child dies from unsafe water, symbiotic partnerships between the public and private sectors to deliver efficient, equitable, and environmentally sustainable use of water, raising the quantity, quality, and reliability of finance. I've certainly been arguing that Pakistan's financial sector is so conservative, and our banks are so conservative. They never come up to support water sector development and the water value chain. And then we need to harness data as a foundation for action by government, businesses, and communities. Now, the corporate sector has a lot to answer for. I think we all agree. And the new thinking says that there needs to be mandatory market-based disclosure of corporate water footprints, which they don't do now. Carbon footprint, but not water footprint. Then transparency on the double materiality of water risk posed by companies' operations in every sense. Where are they dumping their waste? How much water are they using? What do they do with wastewater? And impact of their operations on both blue and green water. And water disclosure be made integrated into sustainably related disclosures, and this also should apply to transboundary water agreements and arrangements. And we need to value water as natural capital to enable responsible stewardship, build global water governance, and that applies particularly to transboundary areas, and there are many implications for that. So this report calls for establishment of a global water pact that sets clear and measurable goals. And this new narrative on transboundary disputes. I think the word disputes needs to be dropped, because as long as we keep on saying disputes, in our minds we will be thinking negatively. We need to value transboundary river, lakes, glaciers, and groundwater, move to management and cooperative solutions, follow SDG 652 principles, strengthen source-to-sea approach, and address data gaps. Now, technically, all rivers are transboundary. Even within Pakistan, we have provinces, and then we have divisions, and then we have districts, and then we have different districts for irrigation. So all rivers and all waters are transboundary in that way. And there are administrative units that crisscross rivers, and all rivers have upper and lower riparian. So this needs to be part of our thinking. It's not just about countries or two countries. And capabilities of people and institutions to manage effects of global climate change, we must recognize that. And we should move to smaller and more manageable water infrastructure. So I've been saying for a long time, we need to build 1 million or 2 million ponds, not more dams. And they will store as much water, but they are for communities. They are low cost. There are less chances of kickbacks. These are things people will understand. And building on the physical health of rivers as well as lakes, groundwater, and springs. And lastly, I'd just like to invite all of you that we have to now invert the old mantra, which said think global and act local. We have to think local, find the local solution, and then ask for the global actions that are required to make them happen. Thank you.
the need for cooperation within nations, between nations of a region, and among nations. So we now come to the third panelist, which is none other than myself. And my job is to discuss with you, to tell you what is happening to the Indus Water Treaty, which was until recently, until 2 years ago, widely acclaimed as the most successful water sharing agreement in the world. It was particularly, this agreement was praised for surviving 2 full-fledged wars, smaller war, and hundreds of skirmishes along long and contested borders between India and Pakistan, the signatories of this treaty and the major riparians of the Indus river system. The major parties, India and Pakistan, time and again reiterated their commitment to the implementation of the Indus Water Treaty in letter and spirit. Now, I mentioned that the Indus Water Treaty was a water sharing, but it was not, in a classical sense, a water sharing agreement. It was a water dividing agreement. And because instead of apportioning the quantities of water, it simply bifurcated the 6 major rivers of the Indus Basin between the 2 major riparians. So the eastern river, Ravi, Sutlej, Beas, were given to India for its unrestricted use. The 3 western rivers, which were the larger rivers, the Indus and Chenab and Jhelum, were given to Pakistan, again for unrestricted use, but while the rivers were in transit to Pakistan from India, India was allowed to use small quantities of water, about 5 million acre feet for agriculture purposes, for irrigation, for human consumption, and the most important, to build run-of-the-river power generating projects. Again, the run-of-the-river projects were meant to ensure that no more than 3.6 million acre feet of water was used on just enough water to propel the turbines to produce electricity, so that Pakistan's rights to the access the waters of the western rivers is not compromised. The Indus Water Treaty is also lauded and praised for, number one, creating an executive body for managing the implementation of the agreement. So that was the Permanent Indus Commission, comprising 2 senior water experts as Indus Commissioner. They could have as many staff members as they wanted. And the third major feature of the Indus Water Treaty was the very elaborate 3-tier dispute settlement mechanism. I also call it the dispute avoidance mechanism, and I'll explain. If there were any questions about the implementation or the rights of the parties, they would go to the Commission to resolve. If the Commission could not resolve the questions of information, the question of detail, they would turn into differences. Differences of a technical nature had to be referred to a neutral expert. a prominent expert appointed by the World Bank. If the expert felt that she could not do full justice, then a court of arbitration would be established. The chair of the court would be nominated by the World Bank, and there will be 6 more judges. The entire process was with the permission, with the consent of the 2 parties. The most important thing, which later on was also copied in the Global Convention on Non-Navigational Uses of Water, was the prior informed consent. India had to inform Pakistan of its projects, and Pakistan had the right to raise its reservations or objections or opposition to the project. And then I've mentioned how those objections would be handled. So the agreement worked quite well, 6.5 decades. Of course, there were problems. Now, on the 25th of January 2023, India sent a message through its Indus commissioner to the Pakistani Indus commissioner saying, we would like to commence intergovernmental negotiations. Intergovernmental negotiations to review and amend, modify the Indus Water Treaty. And this created quite a stir. Halchal mach gayi Islamabad mein, because the Indus Water Treaty had taken 9 years to negotiate. It had taken hundreds of negotiators. The World Bank had deployed a vice president full-time with hundreds of experts to produce the world's most voluminous water agreement. There are about 8 annexures, and 12 clauses. The agreement is 12 pages, but the annexure run into almost 100 pages. So it's the most voluminous treaty. Now, why this call for amendment of the treaty? Why the call for new negotiations? India was not happy with the way Pakistan was raising objections. Now, India has already built 27 hydropower projects on the Pakistani rivers, the western rivers, with a total capacity of 3,500 megawatts. Pakistan has raised objection to only few. 1974, there was objection to Salal Dam. It was resolved by the foreign secretaries. In 1999, 2000, there was objection on Leghari Dam, which was referred to a neutral expert. In 2010, there were differences on the Kishan Ganga. It was 330 megawatts, but on the Jhelum. And Jhelum is extremely important because any reduction in the flow of Indus directly affects agriculture in both Azad Kashmir and Pakistan. So, on Kishan Ganga, the Court of Arbitration, on the one hand, upheld India's right to build the power station. On the other, prescribed that you must ensure that Pakistan gets so many cubics of water uninterruptedly. And you have to make so-and-so design changes to ensure that Pakistan gets most of the water. India made some design changes. Pakistan found that the design changes were not satisfactory. So it asked for the Court of Arbitration again. First, it asked for a neutral expert in 2015, and later on, Pakistan changed its mind and asked for a Court of Arbitration. It changed its mind because it had problems with the neutral expert's verdict on Leghari. I can explain, but that will take too much time. So now what happened? The World Bank received requests from both countries, from Pakistan for the Court of Arbitration, from India for a neutral expert. And they didn't know what to do. So they sat on the proposal. They called it pause and said, please, you sit together and come to us with an agreed solution. Do you want a court of arbitration or do you want a neutral expert? These two stubborn countries could not agree. So in 2022, the World Bank took the amazing step of saying, okay, we'll have a court of arbitration because Pakistan wants it. We'll also have a neutral expert because India wants it. So you had two parallel processes for examining the same complaints. And this has procrastinated. India doesn't agree with the Court of Arbitration, has been boycotting. Pakistan is participating, of course, in the Court of Arbitration and neutral expert. And, of course, the speed was very slow because of this problem. The neutral expert is not sure what the Court of Arbitration will do. The Court of Arbitration is not. So, but we were hoping, those of us who are following the Indus Water Treaty, I am not per se involved in the Indus Water Treaty. My interest is an environmentalist because the organization that I managed for a decade, we had a program on international waters, which considered the Indus Water Treaty as a model for other countries to emulate. So we were thinking that some solution will be found, but India has, so I spoke to the Foreign Secretary. The Foreign Secretary convened a meeting and then instructions were given to the Indus Commissioner. You tell your counterpart, yes, we can discuss your grievances. You have problems for which you want negotiations. We think that they can be resolved by the Commission. India did not answer. And now, a new development, they kept on asking for intergovernmental negotiations. The new development is the more recent one. 22nd of April, there is a terrorist attack in Pahalgam. And 23rd, the Indian government announces 5 measures. The top of the list of 5 is holding the Indus Water Treaty in abeyance until Pakistan shows evidence of that it has abjured support for terrorism. So that's where we are. I have the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is currently intensively discussing and reflecting on India's call for negotiations. India has explained that there are a number of reasons why the treaty must be amended. And the reasons they have mentioned are population demographics, environmental issues, and the need for development of renewable sources of energy. Now, how do we evaluate the so-called rationale for India's demand? I've written as many as 4 articles in the newspaper explaining and rebutting essentially each and every one of the reasons given by India for its call for renegotiating the agreement. I've said, first of all, it took 9 years for India and Pakistan to negotiate. You will have to deploy an equal number of people. The nature of India-Pakistan relations, I have dealt with India-Pakistan relations for 7 years. 4.5 years in the Pakistani High Commission in India and 2.5 years in Islamabad. If you are drafting a most innocuous statement, meaning the foreign secretaries met, discussed the whole range of issues, agreed to meet again, this will take hours, if not days and weeks. So I said there is simply not enough time to devote to amending a treaty that had taken so much time, protracted negotiations, and hundreds of negotiators. Number two, I said you talk about population. Yes, population has increased in Pakistan from 37 million to 245 million. In India, again, from 600 to 1.2 billion. 600 million or 400 billion. Climate change is important. As Aisha was explaining, we need to discuss the Cryosphere, the glaciers which feed rivers that we have shared. The monsoons are shared. We have so much ecological similarities and contiguities. We need to talk, but you don't need to amend a treaty which fundamentally deals with water division. These are issues that our experts have time and again asked for discussion, for cooperation. So what we need is, in my articles, I've recommended an open-ended, comprehensive water sharing dialogue. It's indeed unfortunate that in the past 65 years that we have had this agreement, we have never sat together to discuss water issues. If you are discussing the main sources of fresh water, how can you, as Simi was also explaining, there is a need, there should be, she said, the riparians should hold at least one meeting every year. There was a meeting, the Indus Commission, which India has postponed. In September last year, they said, you have not answered, please do, but we will not have the commission meeting. If you don't have the commission meeting, that means Indian projects will go unchecked, unmonitored. Pakistan will have no means of monitoring physically, personally, what the Indians are doing to its own, to the rivers that were allotted formally to Pakistan with those limited uses that I have mentioned. So we are, and this Indian call has come at the worst time in our relations. Our relations have touched the rock bottom, and more recently, from what we heard from Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri on the 23rd of April, the personnel strength of the missions, of the high commissions, has been drastically reduced from 55 to 30. When I was in India, we were 125 people. Now it will be 30. And travel has virtually been ended. Pakistan and trade has been ended. Wagah Atari checkpoint has been shut down. All SAARC visas have been cancelled. So we have an unprecedented deterioration in relations while we are discussing and dealing with the most important issue, the most fundamental prerequisite of life, that is water. And as Aisha explained, water for Pakistan is much more important than for many countries because your economy is water-based, your exports are based on agriculture, and livelihoods are based on agriculture. Because 56% of your population is still in the rural areas, critically dependent on agriculture and all that. So my worry is that India today has acquired, its economic growth has been very impressive. The United States seems to have recruited India in its drive to neutralize the rise of China. And so India seems to have all the points in its favor, whereas Pakistan has all kinds of challenges. As far as the recourse, my recommendation was the dialogue. And I don't know if there are other ways of getting the Indians to change their mind, because you can obtain an opinion from the International Court of Justice, but the opinion will not be binding unless India agrees. There are very limited possibilities. Of course, you can go to the Security Council when you think that there is a threat to peace, and you can interpret the deterioration in your economic situation resulting from the closure of water as threatening your internal security, but the prospects are not very good. How are we going to deal with this extremely unprecedented situation? I'm not sure. Now, the questions that would be have been bothering our television people: can India stop or divert our water? As far as this question is concerned, I would like to make general observations that it is not easy. It is not easy to divert or stop rivers, and as mighty rivers as the Indus, as the Jhelum and Chenab. There are a number of challenges. There are political and diplomatic challenges. India is a transboundary river country. It is lower riparian for rivers coming from Nepal and Brahmaputra from China. It is upper riparian for Pakistan and Bangladesh. But would India like to be projected in the world as a country that has gone back on a duly negotiated agreement? There definitely are risks to a country which claims to become a permanent member of the Security Council. Then there are geophysical and practical geological difficulties in creating storage where you can divert the Pakistani rivers, and but you also have to have uses for that water. I mean, you can't just divert water because you want to hurt your adversary. You have to have some uses because maintaining the diversionary infrastructure is enormously expensive. So the Indus, it's virtually impossible. There may be possibilities of some, dual-purpose projects on the Chenab, maybe one or two on Jhelum, but like India has prioritized 9 projects, which towards Modi had established a task force. And this task force identified 9 projects. All the 9 projects are run of the river. Their total capacity is 5,000 megawatts, that means that they are large projects, because if 27 already built projects accumulate to 3,500, then 9 projects producing 5,000 megawatts of electricity must be really mega projects. But run-of-the-river projects are allowed under the treaty. What they don't want, perhaps, is that the Pakistanis raise objections, which we certainly will. Because if you suddenly have 5,000 megawatts of power stations, there would be huge stations, and there would be design issues and all that. So Once again, I go back to my suggestion of a dialogue between India and Pakistan. You can discuss all the complaints that India has among experts based on jointly produced, uh, papers with cooperation from relevant international agencies. So that's where we are. There is no need for immediate panic, but given the importance of water, the suspension of an agreement that had taken so much work and had served both nations so well, just because the major country of the major riparian is a powerful country and is unhappy, I think it's not fair. So that is where we are, and I would be happy to answer any questions that.
So thank you very much for your wonderful and comprehensive briefing. So you mentioned regarding, I'm kind of straying from the subject, but you mentioned dialogue, suggested dialogue with India. And you know it very well, sir, that India is not going to accept our offer of dialogue. They have cut off all their relations with us. But I was wondering that, Iran and Saudi Arabia and China have kind of offered and have already spoken to the respective foreign ministers. So do you see any possibility of rapprochement through their good offices for initiating or for starting dialogue with India?
I hope so. And that is exactly what, actually, the dialogues that were held between 2010 and 20, there were four major track two dialogues. There was one managed by Sustainable Development Policy Institute in Pakistan and Stimson Center in Washington. There were two sets of dialogues between Jinnah Institute, Pakistan, the Center for Policy for Development and Reconciliation, CDR in India, and the Atlantic Council, when Shuja Nawaz was there, held a number of consultations between experts and politicians. These were influential countries, and we hope that they will persuade India that the answer to the grievances, which may be legitimate, maybe, lies in broad-based dialogue rather than negotiations for a treaty in which both sides try to maximize their advantage on even, commas and semicolons and all that.
If I could just add to that, so there's the track two dialogues. I've been part of many of them, and one of the biggest ones was the Global Water Partnership dialogues that went on for 10 years in the decade that has just been mentioned. The problem is that is citizen to citizen contact. And also there are government people involved, but they speak in their personal capacity, they sing a different tune. And when they speak on behalf of their governments, they say something completely different. Right now, India perceives itself as very powerful. And if you have noticed, somebody's put up an analysis that every time an American president visits them or is about to visit them or has just visited them or there are negotiations, always there are terrorist attacks happening around that time because it strengthens India's position to get them on their side. So I think the political situation is very bad at this time, and the best thing is that we should lay off for a little while, let everything cool. And I don't think India, the Indus River is not a tap to be turned on and off. So there's a lot of chest beating and it's a lot of, the caveman speaking. But as it was said, it's going to take them years, decades to put up these things. And the cost will be really prohibitive. Don't think they can do it all so quickly.
About the climate change during 2010 floods, it was proposed that flood water from the Sakhar barrage, it should be diverted via Nara Canal towards the Thar Desert. So this flood water could be useful for 10 years in the Thar for the agriculture purpose. And Sindh government also planned that there should be the inclination in the Nara Canal so the water could reach to Thar. But this project was not materialized. Rather, the federal government had some other plan of diverting towards Cholistan. So not only Cholistan, but also towards Thar desert, the water should be diverted. And also, there was a plan that there should be 32 small or large dam in Sindh. So flood water could be used for that purpose. I don't know why that was not materialized.
If you look at what happened to the Indira Gandhi Canal, you take a satellite picture, it's not green. It's not green around it. It's very, very difficult to make the deserts bloom, especially with canals, which are extremely expensive. Sand is porous, water goes down really easily. So there have been very few greatly successful examples of water being carried hundreds of miles through a canal. The deserts have bloomed with other technologies, and so those other technologies should be accessed. So the Rainy Canal is half done, Thar Canal is half done, and of course right now there's massive opposition on very sound ground. So there has been opposition to Thar and Rainy Canal before as well. So I think that there are many, many other ways we can store water and use water, and that we should be talking about those instead.
Yes, please. I just want to ask about mitigation. Water management could be, we could have recourse to water which is normally goes under flood or under certain other circumstances. It goes to the sea and is wasted. Has there been any mitigation? How much water goes into the sea, and what is the mitigation option that Pakistan has, assuming that India will divert water because it has chosen to stop the treaty?
Yes. I don't know the quantities. I saw the quantities mentioned, but there has to be some sweet water going into the sea in order to prevent the coming of the sea onto the coastal areas. And in fact, probably the Arabian Sea has not been receiving enough quantities because we have saline water coming into the coastal areas. At least 3 districts, Thatta, Badin, and Sajawal, have received increasing quantities of saline water, which have destroyed the fishing communities as well as the small agricultural holdings in the coastal areas. So if the sweet water is going into the sea, it is not a waste, it's an investment. You are sustaining the delta, and it has been proved, I think CB can also discuss this, but a certain quantity of water going into the sea is an investment in the sustainability of the deltas.
So under arrangements with the water accord and how IRSA operates around that, in the original study there was supposed to be 10 million acre feet going into the sea every year, not average worked out over so many years, and it has not happened. And in any case, the amount of water available in our systems has fallen from one time it was 140, 114, and now it is just 95 or 96. That is being divided in Kharif and Rabi seasons. But the reason why that water has come down is not because India is doing or can do things. It's because a lot of it is wasted in transmission. And we don't measure water as we should. Telemetry is very easy to do, but I think the provinces or whoever is responsible prefer not to have that. So basically, we have to ensure that the share of water that we have, we use it as best as we can. save, I think about 60% is lost in transmission. Only 40% gets to the farm gate. So, we can make water, much more water by recovering this than by building more expensive infrastructure. So that's the way we need to go. We need to prime the Indus Basin to give us all the water that it can. We can reuse the same water many times. And these are the methods that you're saying. You use the word mitigation, but now the word mitigation in terms of climate change is passé. We can only do adaptation. The age has gone.
I've heard that Mumbai, for example, as a case, has constructed about 15,000 small dams in Gujarat, as an example. Could we also explore those options?
Yes, why not? Because, when I talked about pondage, we can link pondage with the small infrastructure. We can do so much in Balochistan with those 300 non-perennial rivers that get flash floods every year or whenever there are rains. Certainly, that's the way to go.
I think we.
Ji, Assalamualaikum. I'm Syed Khabar Mehdi from Concerned Citizen Alliance based in Karachi. Now, the first documented water wars was in Sumeria. That was 2,500 years ago. The first documented water wars was in Sumeria 2,500 years ago. And the first time this term, water wars, was coined in 1990 in an article in New York Times. Fast forward to 2025, how come we haven't preempted this, that a water war was coming? There have been articles on it in New York Times, in the Fortune, Wall Street Journal, other journals even in Southeast Asia. All this time we have been playing all kinds of water games. How come we didn't preempt this water war?
Water war between India and Pakistan, or water war within? I hope not. I hope not, because so far the international community has ensured that there has been no active hostilities over water issues. There are water differences, but there has been no military clash because of water issues, and I hope that we have the means, the resources, the restraint to prevent conflict over water.
My question was on the preemption. How come we didn't preempt this situation in the 35 years since this term was coined? We didn't preempt it. Our experts in NDU, Foreign Office, what were they doing?
I think that the scenarios of what may happen, I am pretty certain that our military has those things in mind. I cannot believe that they're sitting so completely oblivious when they do take so many little actions for things where they're not even required to be present. I assume that they have some scenarios, but I don't think they're going to be shared. Just like I'm sure India has many such scenarios already prepared. So let's just hope that we don't come to that point.
Well, I will just say that, for the audience, that water was, is, and will continue to be a very contentious issue. It's going to shrink in future times, and demand will outstrip supply. So I think there is no way any country can really mitigate. The best thing is to try and promote hydro-solidarity. That is why it is very important to have water dialogues, like the chair has said, to try and find a way in which everyone gets enough so that the other party doesn't get deprived. And personally, my own comment on the reopening of the Indus Water Treaty or renegotiating is, I think we are being a little paranoid about it. We just look at it through the lens of fear that we have a good thing going, and if we start discussion on this, something will go wrong or to our disadvantage. I think if we look at the Indus Water Treaty and we see that dynamic forces in climate and otherwise have changed drastically from the time when it was made, there are lots of issues that in dialogues where Ambassador Shafkat Kaka has also been with me at forums, we have discussed that Environmental flows was not an issue at the time. Quality of water was not an issue at the time. Telemetric information sharing was not an issue at the time. All these things are important. So if we say yes, we are willing to talk, but let's set the TORs, let's set the framework, and we should have our homework right, and we should say that sustainability of flows and equitable distribution will be the two fundamentals around which we will look into the other areas. I think it can actually go into our favor, because I spoke about the cryosphere. Nobody has asked any question about that, but we could bring the cryosphere back into the Indus Water Treaty, because right now the cryosphere is melting more due to what India is doing. It has developments from where black carbon is accelerating the melting of the HKH cryosphere. So we need to have a very good team, do our homework first, and then respond. We should not just respond with fear and anxiety.
In the same region, in fact, until recently, we were one country. We share the monsoons, we share geography, we share history, we share customs, and I think it is not unreasonable to suggest that we sit together. There have been occasions when we did sit together. We did resolve issues either between ourselves or through third-party mediation and intervention. And I hope that happens. And Dr. Masuma, you want me to conclude? Yes, we had wide-ranging discussions on water issues, starting with the spirited presentation by Aisha Khan on Cryosphere. And as she explained, the Indus river system, the rivers of our region, 10 rivers, critically depend on the glacial melt. And it is therefore the sustainability of the glaciers is extremely important, as is the sustainability of the livelihoods of the communities which depend on the glaciers. And Aisha Khan mentioned that as a result of the higher temperature in the wake of climate change, the glaciers of the Himalayas and Karakoram are witnessing rapid melting. And if the rate of melting is rapid, we have floods initially and then a water deficit. And if the glaciers, the mass of the glaciers is affected irretrievably, then we have drought-like situation. Aisha Khan lamented that enough attention is not being paid to take care of the cryosphere and the communities that live in the vicinity of the high altitude mountains and glaciers. And she mentioned about the critical dependence of Pakistani economy and livelihoods on water, on agriculture, which again in turn depends on the reliable availability of water. And Aisha Khan also put a lot of emphasis on the need for regional cooperation due to the dictates of our shared ecology and common ecological conditions. And she made a very, very touching, gave us a choice, that the choice is between chaos and poverty, and destabilization, which is doom and gloom, or peace, prosperity, and stability. Simi Kamal, who has, she spoke about the transboundary rivers, which are now shared by scores of countries in Asia and Africa and Latin America, and she talked about the need for returning to nature and to respond to the imperatives of nature in managing our rivers. And she spoke about the need to recognize the rights of rivers and to life as legal persona. It's a very interesting subject I was dealing with when I was in UNEP. And then she, of course, described the basic prerequisites of the management of transboundary rivers, what the transboundary river countries should do, and she expressed regret that only 43 out of 153 transboundary water sharing rivers have functioning cooperative arrangements. This must change, and so as far as the importance are concerned, as she mentioned, that 61% of the world freshwater resources are actually held by transboundary rivers. She made recommendations for management of transboundary rivers within countries, between countries, and among countries. As far as my own presentation was concerned, it basically referred to the recent threats posed by India to the survival of the Indus Water Treaty, a treaty that was widely acclaimed as the most successful water sharing agreement in the world and a model. And a Pakistani spokesperson actually described the Indus Water Treaty as the gold standard in terms of water sharing agreements. So I mentioned that while India cannot possibly divert in a short period of time the rivers distant for Pakistan, there is a need to ensure that the grievances of India are addressed through cooperative means, through discussion and dialogue and cooperation, and not undermining of duly negotiated treaties. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.